Hi there, my name is John Stevens, pastor of Zion Lutheran Church in Oregon City, Oregon, and we're part of the ELCA, and welcome to Dollar Store Children's Sermons, where we take a look at the lectionary text. We tie them to an item from the Dollar Tree. This is for the Reign of Christ, or Christ the King Sunday, November 20th, and we are looking at the Gospel lesson, Luke 23, which is Christ on the cross and Christ on his throne, if you will, and what I'm looking at this text is as God's love, God's grace poured out to the world. God's grace that is poured out to the world. That's my takeaway, that God's love for us pours out upon the world. So, a couple of different ideas that I'm going with this, and it all has to do with like the flow. And you'd think of using water, as I'm saying here, you might actually use a pitcher of water and talk about that into the waters of baptism as Christ's love, as God's love flows out upon the world. Talk about a waterfall. I am two ideas that I've been playing around with. One is at the Dollar Tree and dollar stores and at gaming stores, they've got the little sand dials, the little timers that you turn, and the sand falls down. I mean, if you might be recalling, you fall into that demographic of my age or older, where it's you might remember the soap opera, The Days of Our Lives. Sands of an hourglass, so are the days of our lives. But this idea that the sand flows out, and we can talk about how that flows out, and that reminds you of God's grace and God's blessings. The other thing I'm thinking about, and this is a little more fun, is that at the Dollar Tree, or if you've got around the Dollar Tree, they've got these sewing kits, so you can find it at the Dollar Tree. But if you have it at your house, you have some needle and thread. You're going to need to set this up beforehand. But you take some of that thread, you pull it out, put the thread in your pocket, and then with a needle, you take the needle and you feed a little bit of the thread through. Like, for example, I'm going to use this is a lot more, this is a lot thicker than the regular thread, so this is for illustration purposes, so you can see it, or so you can really see it. So you would have, for example, I'm going to feed it actually through my armpit, but you would take a needle and you would feed it, you would put it through, you'd poke it through the skin. So, for example, you have the thread spindle, which is being represented by this twine wrapped up, again for illustration purposes. You'd have that in your pocket, and the thread spindle would actually move in your pocket because it's smaller. You take this and you feed it with a needle through your alb or through your shirt to where you can see it on the outside. So, for example, you would have hanging, leaning on your alb, there would be a little piece of thread, and it looks like it'll look like a piece of thread that is coming undone. You know, we've all had it. We've all had like either a little piece of thread that's been on your shirt or a piece of lint, and the idea is that you notice it. You know, it's here, and you notice it, and you're like, huh, and you go to pull it out. Well, it's going to be feeding through that hole. It doesn't hurt your clothes at all. But you pull it out, and it pulls a little bit more, and a little bit more, and it keeps, and because of the spindle, it'll keep unraveling, and you can keep pulling it out, and as you pull that out, you say, you know what, this thing is unending. This thing, it's amazing. This is kind of weird. You know what? This kind of reminds me a little bit about God's grace and God's unending love. And, you know, in the gospel lesson, we hear about Jesus Christ on the cross and God showing God's love for us and for the world. And so I'm tying this in. And it's just, again, a fun, strange thing. When it's a great practical joke, by the way. If you have a black shirt and you can feed a little white piece of string right here, and you're standing there in the store and someone reaches up because they're going to be helpful, and they pull and they just start getting the string. But for the children's sermon, you have it there and you notice and you're like, oh, and you pull it and it keeps coming out. And it's a great illustration about God's unending love, and that's where I'm going with it on this week. So I hope you can use it. I hope it's a springboard for your own thinking about God's grace and God's love. And remember this week that God loves you as well. We preached this gospel of love, and sometimes we can forget to bring it back upon ourselves. So God's love and God's grace pours out upon you as well. So thanks for stopping by, and I hope you have a fantastic week.